Hello, welcome. Duvid here, Esoteric Duvidism with Brundlefly. Tonight we'll be talking about the ADL statistics in preparation for my discussion with JF. I wanted to have these statistics fresh on my mind and kind of like put them out there in case he promotes my channel and anyone sees my channel, just so these numbers were out there. I'm not promoting anything. I'm not backing anything. I want people to be able to draw their own conclusions, but I just wanted to put out these statistics. They're kind of interesting, regardless of what you think about the ADL. You have anything you want to
add? You know who? There's this guy, Cater Endless. He's been on Luke's show before. He's been on my show. I think you might have actually. Yeah, actually, I think you have interacted. You saw it. Did you see that American Pride clip went back and clipped an old show we did?
Yeah, I saw he was on that with me, and it seemed really low quality. The mic wasn't plugged in, and like Peter had like his wind issue.
Oh my God, Peter! Oh my God.
We're all trying to stress different points, but it still got like 2,000 views because I think my point on
it got more views than the original video.
Well, I'll put it up there because he probably has like he's got 8,000 subscribers, so obviously put something up there, it's gonna have access to a lot more views than anything on your channel.
Yeah, no question. And he but yeah, no, Cater wrote a book about the history of the ADL. It's been in my hopper for things to have on the Brundlecast, is have him and come talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know. He keeps on delaying it or something. It was supposed to be out.
Well, yeah, it's his. I think the guy that was supposed to write the foreword has been sick or something. Like maybe like actually ill. I don't know. But he's prepared. I might actually, if you're interested, I could send him the link.
Yeah, sure. I actually checked him before, and I saw that I wasn't connected to him on Twitter. But yeah, I'm happy to add him if you think he's on. We spoke a few times, and it's like I added in the title of this also Frame Games Diversity Industry, where Frame Games says the ADL is just like the nails of a larger beast, which generally, like I pointed out in my complaint to Frame, that in essence that the federations do countless things, nursing homes. They have like 100 million in New York City. The federation has like a $2 billion a year budget, and less than like 0.5% of that would go to the ADL if the ADL is not a private organization. Or in terms of Jewish charities, the ADL is very marginal, and even APAC relatively is very small compared to the bulk of Jewish charities, which is nursing homes and your vocational family services, educational institutes, and things like that. And maybe if it's interesting, I don't know if anyone's going to come and watch this. If not, we could just pound through these statistics. But maybe I could put that out there also, just so people get a feel of it, the type stuff that federations do, and the minorness of the budget of what people may be familiar with. Which is why I first wanted.
Yeah, well, and I think, but his point, I think more about. I don't think it's so much that the ADL is the fingernails of the Jewish lobby in the sense that, or Jewish institutions, because obviously, like you said, I mean, Jewish institutions are involved in a lot more than political lobbying or political activity. I think his point was that the ADL is the fingernail of the overall, what he terms the diversity industry, which is, I don't know, the NAACP, like corporate HR departments, like the whole behemoth or the Leviathan of pushing all the different minority rights and
democratic
minority
politics.
Interests. Yes,
I mean, same
Democrat,
yeah. It's like President Trump said, there's no bigger power than to be president of the United States, even though, to some extent, as an individual, he was more, he made more money and he had, nicer and better things than the government could offer. But only as president of the United States could he sign checks for hundreds of billions of dollars, or could he control trillions of dollars. There's no one in the private sector who could do that. And that's why democratic politics, if you could get your person into office, you're going to control substantially more money and power than is conceivable in the private sector.
Right.
In relative to what Frame says, Jews are just a pawn in that also. What he was talking about, the NAACP and kind of like basically like buying people off where you get the organization to give you an award. In essence, they do that with the Jews too, because it's like someone like Donald Trump had more awards from Jewish organizations than like almost any man in the history of the world. He had, and he said even before he started running for president, almost half of his awards came from Jewish organizations. He was the Grand Marshal of the March for Israel like 10 years ago. That like hundreds of thousands of Jews go where they march in favor of Israel down Fifth Avenue in New York City, and so many different organizations had made them the dinner, even though a lot of Jews dislike him, but because he had power or whatever. So whatever Frame Game said about the minority, that would probably also apply to Jews. And the ADL also, in the sense, like you could probably make a donation to the ADL and buy them off, so to say, and they'll make a dinner in your honor, just like Steve Bannon or something. Steve Bannon had the dinner with the ZOA, or Shmuley Boteach's Values Network that gives awards to people. So there are certain ways to get in on it. Maybe Luke's show is still going. That's why no one's watching.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening.
So why don't I start with this, which this stuff's pretty basic and important. When we did the statistics the other day, and you saw like most Americans, like half of American geography has 0 Jews living in there, and only like 10% of geographic America has enough Jews that it's likely that your average non-Jew would know a Jew. So if you live in a major city area, you would know the federations, like maybe you belong to a JCC, you would see synagogues, maybe you would even have benefited from Jewish charities. But the ADL has a lot of reach that people across America felt the power of it, and they assume that like that's all we do. But the main thing the ADL does, relatively, I'm going to put it on the screen share now. The main thing the ADL does is basically bean counters. They count incidents of anti-Semitism, and they're relatively not that well staffed. I'm saying, like in Michigan, maybe ADL has like 2 to 5 people working for them, but they'll get on the phone. That was enough to help shut down Richard Spencer. Just one lawyer in an office calling businesses and threatening them, like it's not a good idea to host these people. It's going to be bad for their business, and having the news interview that the ADL is enough connected that they could get interviewed on the news, or if it's a big issue, the Jewish community will probably back the ADL. So in something like Richard Spencer or something like that, it was a big concern to the larger Jewish Institute, and in terms like Christmas trees or different things. But here's your annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents. If
that's a high energy cover image.
Yeah, and obviously it's Charlottesville. And
how did you feel about that march? As just a quick tangent. Good optics, bad optics.
To me, my logic said that only 1,000 people showed up. Like to me, it was a sign like how marginalized it was to think that something like white nationalism, where there's 200 million whites in America, that only like 1,000 people, and this was the Unite the Right, supposedly like every white nationalist organization across the country is supposed to be showing up, and like 1,000 people showed up. So to me, I thought it was kind of showing that there wasn't that much power in these ideas. But to the Jewish community, like it was the biggest thing ever. Like every Jewish newspaper had articles on it, like every day for weeks. Every Jewish station was talking about it. Every Jewish talking head, you had to chime in their opinion. There were like town halls and special meetings and gatherings. Like, what are we going to do about the rising anti-Semitism? And
Well, and I think this is something that, I don't know if you've made this point. I recall Frame Games making this point that basically the ADL is there to gin up, like basically, or they're there to scare Jews about the threat of white nationalism. Kind of like what is the joke, or it's the quip by some German Jew. He said that he used to read the Nazi papers because it was like, when he read that, like, the Jews like controlled everything. They were the richest and most powerful. They controlled the banks, the media. But if you read the Jewish newspapers, like, they were the victims and being beaten down. And
that was your original comment to me, about why I liked Kevin McDonald so much, because it makes me look good. It gives me, like, I'm just some loser Jew that no one likes. I can't even get two people to watch my YouTube channel, and then here's these people saying that we control the world. So they're more interesting than my rabbis.
Right, exactly. I wonder. I mean, you think that's true? I mean, not so much.
Well, I said it, basic, from conservative principles, that people are basically justifying cushy jobs. And you could look at the same argument from the military. Like, we waste, Trump is saying we have to beef up the military and we have to increase spending, or Israeli politics, or the police, you need more police officers. And then, so your average person, we don't really need those people. Let's put the money to welfare and social justice causes, and crime won't be so bad. So that the police and the military have to make it look like they're much more needed, that there's all these problems over the world, that these dictators that would come and destroy us in Iran, and, the police. And so the same thing with the ADL is that they have to justify their salary. And usually fundraising is part of their job, like saying that they have to get these grants, they have to go out and ask money and beg money, or they have to convince the greater federations to take money away from important things like nursing homes and education or something like that. So when the ADL comes to the federation, it says, like, we need money, and they say, like, our nursing homes are short. Like, there's old people that might die a few years earlier than they should because we're giving you money. So then they have to look, but the whole Jewish people, look what's happening in Charlottesville. So they do have some sort of benefit to pumping this stuff more than it actually is.
Yeah, I could see that.
And and look, we'll see these statistics. So let's look at 2017. The total anti-Semitic incidents in the whole United States is higher than it had been before, 1,986.
How many of that was Jews spray painting swastikas on their own synagogues?
Well, we're gonna see that, but let me just do the math, and that means 1 out of every 3,000 Jews at most experienced an anti-Semitic incident. And maybe if it's in something that affected a larger amount of people. So here they even have monthly comparisons. Like, November was the greatest time, or 2017 it was February and March. I forget if they had a reason why that was so. So here's the data you're looking for. You see your circle charts with
they're pie charts, David.
Yeah, sorry,
wait, those aren't pie. Are those pie charts? These are modified pies.
Yeah, you're like donut charts. But, so here you have assault, vandalism, and harassment. And I've mentioned these statistics. That's why I wanted to put it out there on my channel so people would be able to see it, that assaults are down. 2016, there were 36 assaults. 2017, there was like almost half as many assaults. And that's nothing. I mean, you think 6 million Jews in America, and there was only 19 assaults on Jews because we're Jews here. That's literally like nothing. Although vandalism nearly doubled.
Well, so here's the thing.
And then you also have harassment. Harassment slightly went up.
Well, so here's the thing about those three pots of numbers. Okay, so like assaults is kind of like verifiable, like there's police reports, right? Harassment, I mean, what qualifies and like under what proof, you know?
All these are probably verifiable. I'm saying relatively, it's not a huge number.
Well, what crime, like what court system is going to step in to like who's documenting
I mean,
verified
if you want a conviction,
harassment?
I would assume all of these were things that there were police reports put out over. And I don't know how many led to arrest. Or you saying like how many of the vandalisms actually turned out to be a Jew who did it, or something like that? But I mean, presumably all of these were like if there's a vandalism, presumably the police were notified and there was a police report, and presumably the harassment also, if it was severe trolling on social media. And I don't even think we're not talking harassment. Like I'll get to the Twitter stuff.
Yeah, I just want to point out. I mean that there are documented cases of Jews defacing their own buildings. The guy wasn't there like some 19-year-old in Israel that was calling in like death or bomb threats to a
The whole
bunch of
JCC
American
thing was
synagogues.
by a Jew in Israel, and like I actually predicted that when it was happening. I was like, I guarantee this is an Israeli Jew who's doing it, just from the nature of how it was being done. Um, but you see the numbers, so the numbers, so to
And the
the
key
ADL.
number and the key number being assault. Like I find it interesting that harassments would almost go up by
The
forty
vandalism
percent,
almost doubled.
right? And the harassment's up 40%, but assaults are down 50%. Like that doesn't jive. Like you would think you would see if there's an escalation in verbal confrontation for there to see a corresponding increase in physical altercation.
It could be like what I was saying, that the JQ being more out in the open, people are less likely to just beat up a random Jew because they could talk about it. So that more people are talking about it, but the fact that more people are talking about it, less people are actually doing something about it. And there's some essence in free speech, that free speech is the precursor to violence, and that if you limit the free speech, then there's no barrier between going straight to the violence. So just by allowing the people to speak, that actually limits the violence. You could see
Yeah.
the map, and so they make the big point that every single state had at least one incident, and I showed you the population maps the other day. But like relatively, um, half of this stuff occurred in California and New York, and then next to there you got New Jersey, Florida, Massachusetts, and they actually have the college and university. They said 89% increase in incidents on college campuses, although it's still pretty small, only 204, and assaults, only one assault. And in 2000, so there were zero assaults on college campuses in 2017. 2016, there was only one assault, but vandalisms and harassment almost doubled.
Right.
And
Allegedly. I think there's a lot of self.
well, yeah, that's why I
The
said
fact that the
I'm
assaults
not.
went down by half. I mean,
Well, it's just like, okay, what does this mean? If you look like, that here they have in Minnesota, a swastika was drawn using lipstick on the window of a Jewish person's car. So that's your vandalism. Here near my area, someone like put a swastika on the corner of a street that a bunch of Jews lived in snow. That was like all the Jewish papers, everyone was talking about it, like, oh my God forbid there's going to be another Holocaust because someone made a swastika in the snow. So I mean, you have to know that's what I wanted to say, without making a judgment, to just see what the actual statistics
sure.
said.
According
And
to the ADL.
yeah,
Actually, do they have a citation? Is there a citation for their data?
I think they actually have a list where you could see almost every one of these incidents.
Okay.
And most of them have news stories, because like when we're Jews, we're people of the book, most of the stuff is probably, there's actually probably newspaper articles, and there was police reports, and So you have increases across the board. Noting the decrease. Here you see California, New Jersey, Florida, New York. New York up 90%, and then they have by state. So it's not too interesting. I thought we'd start with this. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
wasn't particularly interesting. Okay, so now we got like 15 people watching.
Yeah, I would say in the
Did
context of JF's show, okay, if you were going to cite that kind of data, you're going to get attacked on the source of the data, and I guess my point about the assaults sort of being like a bellwether for probably the most accurate number, right?
well,
I mean,
I'm unlikely to cite this to JF, but I just wanted the statistics out there for the people who watch me commonly. And, saying as a Jew, I know my local ADL. When I was in New York, I knew the local ADL, kind of like in the same way that you might know your local policeman. So it's not like okay, like I'm neutral on the issue, but like I'm a Jew on the scene. I go to community events, and occasionally the ADL people speak, and I know them because and even people that I know, like, oh, I'm working for the ADL now. I remember in synagogue, like a lawyer. I think she even went to Harvard, and she's like, oh, I'm working for the ADL now, and so saying if you're a Jew, you probably know your local ADL, regardless of your opinion on whether we need them or they do good work or not. I thought this is back from 2015. It's still the most.
what kind of people? The kind of people. I guess people that are in the ADL. Like, what kind of personality types? Have you seen like a theme?
They're usually like these. Honestly, they're usually like these feminist women that have like very Aryan features, like Jewish women with Aryan features. Usually like blonde hair, blue eyes, or if they're not naturally blonde, dyed blonde, and like extreme feminists. I'm not,
Lesbians?
I don't know. Like I don't know personally about that, but usually like the ADL is disproportionately women, and I seem to find that they disproportionately like light featured Jews. Whatever psychology would cause that to be the case. But,
Yeah.
maybe people like your wife or something like saying that you would decide to like whatever reason like you asked. I don't know why you could look at like your pictures and your ADL meetings. This one's more interesting. Your global index of anti-Semitism. This was a bigger survey of thousands of people. I thought you'd get a kick out of these questions if you haven't seen it. And this one, there's a lot more interest in saying it wasn't done since 2015. They'll probably do it again in 2020. This was over 10,000 interviews. So they probably spent millions and millions of dollars, and they sent people all over the world and interviewed 10,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
You see the 19 countries. So here are the questions that they consider anti-Semitism. If you answered yes to one of these questions. So they had 10 questions. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Okay, so number one, Jews are more loyal to Israel than to the country that they live in. And this was asked all over the world. And so if you answer yes to this, they're going to have a statistics like if you answer like yes to like 7 of these questions, you're like a horrible anti-Semite. If you answer yes to like 4 of these questions, we'll see the numbers how they have it.
Yeah. I can't think if someone thinks that the reason people hate Jews is because of the way Jews behave, that's anti-Semitic.
Well, that's why I just wanted to put the information out there and people could draw their own conclusions. And you see, like Patrick Little maybe would have answered yes to all 11 of these questions. And maybe like you or Luke Ford might have answered like to 4 or 5 of these questions, or like where on the spectrum. And then like in someone really strong, be like,
how many would you answer yes to?
Well, let's go through them. Let's go through them. So Jews are more loyal to Israel than to the country that they live in. So I showed you the Pew Data survey. We did that on my channel the other day, and it might be 40% of Jews that might be true. I'm saying there is data to show that actually, a third to half of Jews are actually more loyal to Israel than the country they live in.
Okay.
But I mean, there's actually we'd have to check the Pew data, which maybe after you leave, I'll go through that also. Number two, Jews have too much power in the business world. So there's a question: too much power. Jews have
right. There's a
disproportionate
judgment
power.
call. Disproportionate.
Jews, use nepotism to advance themselves. But it's saying Jews have too much power. It's saying like, okay, there's a problem and something needs to be done about it. Number three, Jews have too much power in international financial markets.
It's the same as two, basically.
But you see the way they word the question, too much power. Saying what does that mean? Too much. Saying so if you think it's too much, you're an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
At least from the way the ADL is looking at. Number four, Jews don't care about what happens to anybody but their own kind. And even Luke basically gave me that, and I was like, oh, of course we care what happens to everybody. We just care more about what happens to our own kind. And it's different than saying we don't care about what happens to anybody but our own kind. Right?
Yes.
I mean,
right.
Luke has had this debate in his show countless times, and saying, no, I mean, saying we have a dual system of morality and ethics, but obviously we care about what happens to the whole world. It's just a higher standard for our fellow Jew. But there might be a certain, it's like, what's the difference between like JF or Norvin or even you? As a if a person calls himself alt-right or a white nationalist, if you just change the word, whites don't care about what happens to anybody other than their own kind.
Yeah.
If you just changed any of these words to whites, if you thought about it like that. Number five, Jews have too much control over global affairs. Number six.
Same as 2 and 3, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's over half of these questions have the too much. Number six, people hate Jews because the way Jews behave, which is intrinsically, saying like you're an anti-Semite
based on your experience. Like it's almost saying like if you have a rationale for your opinion of Jews, you're an anti-Semite, as opposed to, I guess, if you just hate them for no reason, you're not an anti-Semite, which seems ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seems the opposite here. Like, I mean, all these questions are, like very questionable. That's I want just to put it out there. 7, Jews think they are better than other people, and obviously that's very common. Like a lot of people answer yes to this one, and it could be a lot of Jews would do think that it's possible. It's possible we could look at like Pew data survey, an internal Jewish survey, to see.
Well, is there any ethnic group that thinks that they're worse? That they're not the best, right? I mean,
well, that's the like Richard Spencer. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm like saying you're what's the difference between alt-right, white nationalism, and white supremacy? So he's saying if you say okay, whites think they are better than other people, that's white supremacy. But just saying I want to have my own nation or the 14 words or something like that, is that the same thing?
Yeah, dude. By the way, if you were gonna bring any slide to your appearance, like this is it. But anyway, keep going.
Well, I just wanted to get this out there because like,
I know. Yeah.
And when we actually see the data, it'll be more interesting. But we just had to get through the questions. Number 8, Jews have too much control of the United States government. Number 9, Jews have too much control over the global media. This is like, your main TRS, Patrick Little,
Meme.
Zog type. That's been debated on the Luke Ford show. Like, a lot. 10, Jews still talk too much about what happened to them in the Holocaust.
How do you feel about that?
I know a lot about the Holocaust. I know,
but you've seen like the
I'm always promoting events. So I mean, it's one thing to make an event in a synagogue or at the Holocaust Museum or in the local synagogue, or on my YouTube page. You could see on my YouTube page. Then trying to force feed it to people. So, I care a lot about the Holocaust. I studied it. I know almost all the local survivors. Any event with survivors, I'm promoting it. But still, I'm not really talking about it I'm not forcing the subject on people.
Yeah, but I'm sure you've seen Ben Shapiro did a video about it, but it was that study It might even have been that Pew study that we talked about, where it was like what makes someone Jewish, and like 83% of Jews said like remembering the Holocaust is like the key component of Jewish identity. I
Yeah,
mean,
and we
does
had
that
that in the
seem
Pew survey the other day.
yeah?
That's the,
Does that seem like a weird thing to make the centerpiece of Jewish identity? I mean, I think it was the highest.
well,
High,
saying if you're not questioning the narrative, saying I mean the death and murder of half of our people, that's probably the biggest event in our thousands of years of history. So even if you believe in Torah and everything, like when we left Egypt and the splitting of the Red Sea or the Roman destruction, the Holocaust is one of the most significant events, certainly in Jewish history and possibly in modern world history. So I mean, there's a reason why the Holocaust is. I mean, certainly for a Jew, saying like, okay, we have a lot of power here, but you look, almost half of us, the majority of us, were killed or expelled from Europe 75 years ago. That's a big deal. Like that's not going to be forgotten in hundreds of years. Let alone with the survivors still around. And
but like as an observant religious Jew, how does it make you feel that like that is the defining attribute or idea that unifies Judaism?
well, we have a theology built around it. So our theology has, in essence, like our suffering is a major part of our theology. So we could discuss the Holocaust on the different issues. Let's just
Yeah.
pound through these statistics. But it's saying talk too much about what happened to the Holocaust, and so I mean, someone like Norman, he's going to answer yes on all of these questions. Question 11, is probably the most blatantly anti. Jews are responsible for most of the world's wars. So I mean, relatively, all the other questions were you could reasonably see someone saying yes to that. When someone said, like, Jews have too much control of the media, Jews have too much control of the U.S. government, Jews have too much power in international, Jews have too much power in the business world. He's like, Jews are responsible for most of the world's wars, is more borderline on,
Yeah, right.
on
It's
conspiracy.
conspiracy theory, yeah. So okay, so your guess was that Luke or I would say 4 or 5, Patrick Little would be 11. How many would you say that you agree with?
I mean, I might say
Roughly.
that, depending on how you word it, besides for number 11,
Sure at 10.
no, I'm not at 10
10.
because I kind of disapprove. So here it says respondents who said at least 6 out of the 11 statements are true are considered to harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. But I could see 10 of them having a little bit of truth. It's just the way the word, too much. What is
Yeah.
too much? What
Yeah.
does too much mean? So I mean,
Yeah.
six of these questions have the too much in it. But here, for the sake of this survey, if someone says 6 out of the 11 are probably true, I mean, and so it's problematic in general. And like, how do you measure something like racism? So I mean, if you just as I said, change the word white or black into one of these, but this is how they did it. So had to get through it, and so here's the countries that were measured, the population, and so here this is their estimate of people who answered six, more than half of the questions, and people who harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. So the U.S., they say 24 million people, and if you notice in the U.S., we're going to see more details. Only 10% of the United States harbors anti-Semitic feelings, which is about 24 million people. In the UK, the Netherlands, actually the white countries that have the smallest amount of anti-Semitism. Even Belgium, 21%, France, and then if you look like Greece, 67% of the population, the majority of Greece's population harbors anti-Semitic feelings. Iran, 60%. Turkey on this, the highest. 71% of people in Turkey answered six or more on this. So they're estimating there's 35 million anti-Semites in Turkey.
I wonder what's crawled up the Greeks' ass about Jews. 67%. That's kind of high.
Yeah, you probably look into that, and I mean here you could see the percent of the question. So Jews are more loyal to Israel than the country they live in. 44% of the people who responded to that said yes. So almost half of the people who were asked, are Jews more loyal to Israel, the country they live in? Almost half of people of the 10,000 people around the world say, yeah, Jews are more loyal to Israel than whatever country they live in. You know, too much
Yeah.
power in the business world. What happened to them in the Holocaust? Too much power in international financial markets, and you know, I
Well,
would say,
it's interesting that those top four really kind of stand above the other ones. And then the World War one is like you said, the most marginal.
you know, it's
So
15%,
it's
way
about
less than
money,
the other.
the Holocaust, and loyalty to Israel.
Yeah, I mean, too much power in business and money, and then too much power in government. So, I mean, obviously, there's anyone who knows anything knows that Jews have way disproportionate effect in financial money powers. You look at like the world billionaires, the banks, and stuff like that. Um, you know, but say too much or whatever, and then you look at media. So too much control of the media. It's funny. It's only 25% because you know from the alt right talking point, you would assume that media is even more so than banking. You know, it was like red elephants. Like I know more about banking than the media, or like David Duke or something like that. He's more into the media than the banking. But actually, the media, global media at least, you know, if it was the U.S., it might be different.
Oh, here's a Jonathan Poll in the chat to my question about why the Greeks don't like Jews. He said Israel was allied with Turkey for decades. As a result, the Greeks allied with the Palestinians in the 70s.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
some geopolitical
I
games
mean,
going on.
you know, here's the changes. And, you know, that didn't change. These scores didn't change much. France had a dramatic decrease, you know, maybe due to terrorism or like Muslims more siding with the Jews over the Muslims. The Netherlands had an increase, a small. Um, you know, so here they're showing the major changes. In the U.S., it was only 33% that said Jews are more loyal to Israel than them. So it was actually higher in other countries. In Greece, Jews have too much power in the
Oh no,
business world.
you're reading that wrong. The most believed stereotype in the United States is that Jews are more loyal to Israel.
But that was only 33%.
Yeah,
Globally, it
well,
was
because
44%,
right,
but
well,
in the U.S., it's
because
only
the U.S. has a fairly low anti-Semitism
it
score
was only
overall.
10%.
Yeah, right.
You know, so in Greece, too much power in the business world. 9 out of 10 people in Greece thought about that.
And the Romanians are not big fans of the Holocaust.
Yeah, and then that might have you know history. All of these probably you know could have more research. However, you know much your knowledge of global affairs was, and you know that's the last time we went over the global Jewish demographics. So I might just pound through some of the, you know people. The link is in the chat if anyone wants to look at the survey on their own, or they could pause the screen to you know years of schooling. So it's interesting. Um, Christians and atheists, the more schooling and the older they get, the less likely they are to be anti Semitic, as where Muslims, it's the opposite, where the more schooling they have and the older they get, the more anti Semitic they are.
It's probably because Muslim schools teach anti-Semitism, or
There could be a, you know, variation of reasons.
they're counter-Semitic schooling.
So, I mean, if you look at violence, so France actually had relatively pretty high rates of violence against Jews comparative to any other place. That France has the highest rate of violence against Jews. You're the most likely to get beaten up, you know, walking around like I do in France from you know almost any place in the world, and that could be due to Muslims or you know, you know, people who know regional French politics.
Yeah. Well,
But I mean, I guess
I mean,
Germany's
I would almost say like is in France. I mean, it must be tied to like Muslim terrorism and sort of because I think one of the key, one of the uniquely French things is the attack on Jews by Muslims. Like there's a lot more like wasn't there like stabbings at like the Jewish schools and
yeah. I
killing.
mean, they have this all listed. Actually, you could probably find the exact list. Here's more interest, especially in relate to the alt right. You know, the Holocaust happened, but the number of Jews who died in it has been greatly exaggerated by history. And so in the USA, only 5% of people think that the Holocaust is exaggerated and the Holocaust is a myth and did not happen at all. Only 1% of people in the US think that. And in Europe, basically everyone knows the Holocaust happened. Like not even 1%, a statistical amount, completely rejected the Holocaust. And
Yeah.
but in the Muslim countries like Iran, Iran and Turkey, over half of the population thinks that it was exaggerated or a myth, and even almost 10% of the people
Well,
think
what's
that
interesting
it's
is
completely
all,
a myth.
yeah, but like look at the other. So the countries, okay, so these are all Western, with the exception of Greece. These are all Western European or U.S., right? And then go back to the other slide. So here we have Argentina and the Muslim countries, but then we have a bunch of Eastern European countries who, presumably, most of the Jews that died in the Holocaust came from places like Poland and Russia and the Baltic states. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and
could Poland? I mean, we could talk more about the Holocaust and why Poland, because um, in the
why
laws.
would you think? Why would you think that people in the countries that were the actual site of the camps, like,
Well, because I mean, mostly it was the Germans who perpetrated it, and it was remote from the people. The people didn't witness it happening. They might have seen the Jews getting deported or taken away, or some of the the killings at the beginning when they came through. But even the mass killings usually were they God forbid they marched the Jews outside of the town and shot us and buried us in shallow graves. Uh, but your average Polish citizen was removed from what happened, and they just you might not believe it. It's like I can't believe something like that actually happened. Maybe if you thought like the American Indians or something.
but why is he? But why is he less likely to believe it than a Frenchman who wasn't even there?
I mean, because you don't want to think that your ancestors were bad people or allowed something like that to happen. I mean, if you're like really embarrassed, you maybe about like slavery or civil rights, the treatments of blacks, and it's just like, is it possible that my ancestors were kind of just like these rotten people who captured, enslaved, and treated these people so horribly, or is it easier just to reject it or blame it on the Jews or something like that? So the Holocaust also is just if you're German or something, are you going to think that your grandparents were these God forbid like evil rotten people, or are you going to come onto some understanding, um, or are you just going to say like it couldn't happen, no way? I mean, that's just a psychological, and obviously there's a lot of books and scholarship on this topic. We could save that for a different. You just want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get
no, yeah,
through.
keep going. I know.
And here they have more data on France, Belgium, and Germany. Um, people voicing concerns about violence against Jews. France. Um, so I mean, the journalists in France, 71% of journalists are yes, like people are voicing their opinions. Newspapers. So I mean, it's interesting that obviously there's more in the newspapers, and if you look at religious leaders, 15, 17, 14%, as opposed to newspapers and journalists, it's like 50, 71%. So there's a certain disconnect between what the elites, if you want to call them, versus the common man on the issue.
Yeah.
And maybe it's even like Donald Trump. Donald Trump talks about the Holocaust. Obama talks about the Holocaust. All senior politicians, go to Holocaust Remembrance Day as compared to your local people.
Yeah. It's the religious leader thing. I wonder if it's because no one in Europe goes to church anymore, and the only people that are religious are the Muslims, and they're probably not crying about it in the mosque.
Yeah, there could be a bunch of different reasons. So news, TV, newspapers, online. Have you could personally discuss concerns about violence against Jews? Um, So in France, yes, over half of the French citizens have discussed like what's up with like people attacking Jews because it's been in the media like all the time. So I mean, like I could picture that like your average French goy who, maybe he's in the countryside and doesn't even know a Jew, but he's seen those newspaper articles. He's like, what the hell? Like, these people are really in on, attacking the Jews. It's crazy. Like, how many times you have another terrorist or, murder, or, and I follow that, like, God forbid, there's been a lot of like unsolved murders or just random murders, mostly by Muslims or Arabs, like from school shootings to the supermarket to just, like, God forbid, like old woman, houses being broken into and killed. So I mean, France is the worst in any of those. That's like the elite. If I talk with JF, I could mention that also. It's actually interesting. There's an equal kind of breakdown of French Jews leaving France to go to Israel, and otherwise they tend to go to Quebec because Quebec is like a pretty nice place to live that's French speaking. So if you were a Jew in France and up, like, wealthy, educated, you might prefer your lot in Quebec than Israel.
Yeah.
Well, I think he lives like off the grid. He's not. I don't know how connected he is to what's happening in the cities.
Yeah, I definitely think the attacks against French Jews by the Muslims has set that country aside as a bit of an outlier.
So let's see the Muslim. Um, these are Muslims in living in Europe. So the statistics are way higher. So if you look like Belgium, Jews have too much power in the business world. Belgium, ethnically 36%. Belgian Muslims 82%. And I mean, really, that's what Patrick Little said. He's actually, minorities agree with what he said, like almost 50%.
Because they don't have Holocaust guilt.
Well, there might be different ways of understanding it. So I mean, I mean, but you see that Muslims in America would probably also have these disproportionate, and some of these are huge, like, like
Almost double.
almost double, and the like vast majorities versus it's sizable, like German nationals. So that's interesting, and pretty universal, like across all of Europe. The Muslims in like France, most of the, God forbid, the anti-Semitic incidents in Europe to Jews are happening by Muslims or Arabs. A little more data, and that's where we saw the schooling. That the more schooling they have, the more anti-Semitism. Here they say in the age, the older they are, actually the less. But the more schooling, the more.
Well, that's the Muslim oversample is from the European Muslims of those 6 countries. The Muslim main sample is heavily weighted towards the actual the Muslims living in Muslim countries. So it probably has a lot to do with the actual education system.
That's what I need. I need the accountant here to help. Like, I'm a numbers guy, but like you're an accountant.
Yeah. So what this is saying is that in essence, Western education reduces hostility towards Jews, whereas the
education in like Turkey or Iran
may
increases.
enhance it or doesn't negate it. Perhaps it is neutral to that effect. Perhaps life experience accumulates. The point is the education systems are different and have differing effects. It seems pretty clear.
Yeah, and then you have the Holocaust denial, which, highest among Muslims.
Yeah. And higher in countries that like higher in Turkey and Iran, to the point where almost 60% haven't even heard of the Holocaust in those countries.
So here's interesting also, interaction with Jews. People who have met Jews express fewer anti-Semitic attitudes than people who have not. This is true across the 19 countries polled and also among those surveyed in the Muslim. So interaction with Jews, the average index scores 16% never met 40% in Muslims, to interact often 47 to 61%. So I mean, actually the spread between Muslims is less. So people Muslims who deal with Jews also, regularly are almost 50% anti-Semites, as we're never met 60%. But of the non-Muslims, people who interact with Jews, 16%. People who never met a Jew, and I would say that's almost certainly true in America too. That people who the anti-Semitism scores are the highest in rural areas where people don't know Jews.
Yeah. Yep.
In like the red state, blue states. Yeah. So here's the different graph of the same data. Okay, and maybe I'll do one last one if you got the energy. And this one's actually recent in the last few weeks. I think it came out, the Twitter data. The number of anti-Semitic tweets on computer going crazy. Someone hacking me.
It's a DDoS.
Yeah, I have a touchscreen computer. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get control back of my mouse. Anything interesting in the chat?
No, they were. I think the active chatters have gone to Norvin. Norvin is streaming, and since Norvin the Pure is the heart of the alt right, apparently.
He would have answered 11 on those. I mean, really,
right.
that I'm gonna try to hit a button to put my computer to sleep. If I lose you, I guess we'll call it a night. If you're still there in a minute, maybe we'll do the Twitter stuff. Okay.
Yeah. I wonder if the chat can hear me.
Are you still there? Am I still live? Okay, I lost Brundle. Let me see if he wants to come back. I'll just go over this last Twitter data. Nah, I'm getting hacked. Okay, sorry about that. Not sure. It occasionally happens. It may have just been my mouse, so I'll just go over this Twitter data on. Let me re-enter the screen share on the Twitter. So here is a number of anti-Semitic tweets in 2018. So you're starting from January through January 2017 through 2018, and they're showing it's going up in December. Huge spike. I guess I zoomed in too much. Ranging from 36,800 at the lowest to 181,700. So the ADL has a record of all what they consider anti-Semitic tweets, which are probably like buzzwords, and Frame Game talks about that, using certain buzzwords that Twitter will catch. So here Twitter is saying, ranging from, so on any given day, there's anywhere from 5,000 to 25,000 anti-Semitic tweets, which, so the ADL they got people bean counters, and they're getting paid to collect this data. And so I'll put this link in the chat if anyone cares to see it. So detailed finding, anti-Semitic themes. So it says week 29 was Charlottesville, and that had, a huge burst. Week 45, the highest number of anti-Semitic tweets, which was when President Trump announced that he was going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital. So someone, looking at this, so the big peak here in December, November is related to the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem. And in the summer, minor increase related to Charlottesville. So relatively, Charlottesville doesn't, it's hard to tell that had any increase, but moving the embassy to Jerusalem had a huge effect. And Harvey Weinstein, huge amounts of anti-Semitic tweets regarding Harvey Weinstein being a Jew. Rothschild conspiracy theories, always popular. One of the biggest things that they record is anti-Semitic things are related to Rothschild conspiracy theories till today. You'll see George Soros also. They say anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic. People could read the report. The main QAnon. Any of you familiar with QAnon? So they're claiming like QAnon was some anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and that had been 3.3 million posts about this QAnon, in which claimed to be anti-Semitic. This at QANON, and so the ADL considers that anti-Semitic, and there were over 3.3 million retweets of this QAnon. And actually here you have the cross, the hands, and the flag. So a lot of times, in even like Luke Ford's chat or my chat, Blue Lizard, you'll see this cross and the namaste hands. And globalist is a code word for Jews. So here they're claiming that people, when Trump used the term globalist, I think regarding his Cohn, who was his financial advisor that stepped down, Holocaust denial, millions of tweets. The ADL measures that every time someone posts on Twitter Holocaust denial, they call like false flags of fake synagogue attacks or something like that, or people claiming that they're fake. George Soros. So I guess that's it. I'll put the link in the chat in case anyone wants to join and say something about this.